Live all day.
So I need to, first off, find my stuff.
You're good.
Well, good morning and welcome to this year's Fun and Fantasy Budget Committee for 2019-2020.
Is he in the same meeting we
The
were?
first thing we need to do is call to order the meeting and invite the Budget Committee members and staff to introduce themselves. Let's start down there.
Good morning, Jennifer Chambers, Budget Manager.
Good morning, Laurel Bettman, Deputy County Administrator.
Gary Schmidt, County Administrator.
Good morning, Krista Wolf, Finance Director.
Good morning, Roxanne Fisher, Budget Coordinator.
Jan Jiang, Budget Coordinator.
Commissioner Fisher, go ahead.
Okay. Sonia Fisher, Clackamas County Commissioner.
Tom Feely, citizen member.
Jan Lee, Citizen Member.
Jim Bernard, County Chair.
Wilda Parks, Citizen Member.
Ken Humberston, County Commissioner.
Sean Coldwell, Citizen Member.
Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner.
Looks like everybody. So first, we need to state for the record that the following dates and times: 8:30 Wednesday, which is tomorrow, the 29th. We'll reconvene 8:30 Thursday, May 30th, and again 5:30 for a public meeting in the evening, 5:30 p.m. For citizen opportunity to comment. 8:30 on Tuesday, June 4th. Should the committee determine it needs additional times, the following dates have been reserved. Wednesday, June 5th, and Thursday, June 6th. First off, I'll call for nominations for the chair.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I nominate Wilda Parks to be chair of the Budget Committee.
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? I hear people.
Going once, going
Three
twice.
times.
Move the nominations be closed.
There you go. All right, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of Wilda Parks as chair of the Budget Committee, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Motion carries. With this, I'll turn this over to you.
Very good. Thank you so much. I would like to call for nominations for Secretary of the Budget Committee. Nominations for Secretary of the Budget Committee, and it's the easiest job. I did this a couple years. I don't think I did anything during those 2 years. You really do not have to take notes and things like that.
What's the pay?
The same as mine, 0.
Mr. Chair, I would nominate Sean.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been, Sean Caldwell's been nominated for secretary. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I close nominations. All those in favor of Sean as secretary, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. And now call for a nomination of a citizen member of the Budget Committee to serve on the Audit Committee.
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Which audit committee?
The External Audit Committee, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, the External Audit Committee. Mr. Commissioner Savas?
I raised this with the administrator this morning. He indicated to me that this was not actually on the agenda, and I mentioned that it was on the agenda, and I asked that it be delayed. I have a number of, I don't want to muddy the waters with the budget, because that's going to be a big enough task itself, but I do have some questions into the auditor, which I'd like to get some answers for, but I'm going to suggest a more thorough discussion about the purpose and the successes or not of the audit committee in its whole. So I think it ought to be relooked at as opposed to just going ahead with the audit committee in its current structure.
So the audit committee's job is to make sure that the county adheres to state accounting rules and federal rules, correct?
So from staff's perspective, the audit committee does a little bit more than that, but that is a main function of the audit committee. In addition, they receive the report because when a governing body creates a audit committee, which is best practices, they are able to then take that report from the auditors, add any additional recommendations, and provide that back to the Board of County Commissioners. They are a liaison committee, if you will, to the Board of County Commissioners, which is why we have 2 members of the Board of County Commissioners on that committee. And then we've added that additional structure with, per, Commissioner Savis's recommendation from years prior, to have that link from the Budget Committee involved on the Audit Committee as well. So there's also liaison to bring that information back as well.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out why you'd want to delay that. The people have to come from this table. I
Sure.
created the audit committee years ago and we wrote the bylaws.
And gentlemen, I believe that our county administrator has a comment to make, so let's see if that's relevant.
Yes, first, I apologize, Commissioner Savis. I did not see this before we talked. I was not aware it was on the agenda. It clearly is on the agenda. It is not required you do this today. However, I believe the first meeting of the audit committee is in June, so you really don't meet again outside of the next 2 weeks. So you don't have to do it today. You could do it this week or early next week, but you won't meet again until the first audit committee meets before you have a chance to meet again as a budget committee.
So
Commissioner
I
Salas.
believe there's a question posed to me from Commissioner Bernard, so I would maybe ask that if you want to pursue this discussion, I would rather defer it, but if you want to pursue the discussion, I would ask, what reporting have we done, or the members of the audit committee to the Board of County Commissioners?
Over the years, except for this year, we've reported every year to the budget, to the commissioners. This year, because we had no issues, there were no findings. Anyway, I didn't ask them not to. We just didn't ask them to. So if you'd like to have them do that from now on, we can do that.
Who does the auditor work for?
Works for the Board of County Commissioners.
Who hires the auditor?
I would assume we contract that out, so go ahead.
We do a competitive process. There's an RFP, so that is prepared by staff through the finance department. And in the past, there has been some involvement with members of the audit committee to participate in that RFP effort.
I've been in contact with the auditor, full disclosure. I've been speaking with him, not recently in the past couple of weeks, but prior to that. And what I expressed to him is my prior roles in other elected positions, the auditor always solicited input from each of the elected officials of that particular agency that it worked for, and asked if there were any, issues or identified any problems or vulnerabilities and so on. Basically, like an annual report or inquiry from each county, in this case, it would be a county commissioner. That has not happened here. And as explained by the auditor, that's because the auditing firm does not work for the Board of County Commissioners. The auditing firm works for staff, is hired by staff. That was the explanation I got. I have high regard for the auditor, but the structure that we have is not transparent. The structure we have lacks transparency, lacks feedback, and I was waiting actually last year because as a member of the audit committee, I was not solicited for that input, formally or informally, other than the audit committee that took place in June of last year. And nothing took place then. And I learned very, very late that the audit was actually extended until this year, as opposed to being completed by last year. So I have a number of issues, but I'm happy to dig in now if you like.
Oh, no.
I would think that we would want to move on to the rest of our agenda, but we need to first, and Commissioner Humberston, I'll get to you. We need to first answer that question of whether or not we're going to appoint an audit committee member today. And if so, I have a nomination to make. Commissioner Humberston?
Well, it strikes me is that we have 2 separate questions here, one of which is not on the agenda and one of which is on the agenda. The issue that's on the agenda is the appointment to the audit committee.
Yes, sir.
However, it becomes structured. So I would suggest that we make the appointment to the audit committee and then have the discussion about how the structure and reporting aspects of the audit committee go forward at another time.
When you say at another time, do you mean at some time during the next 4 days of our deliberations? Or are you talking about at a quarterly meeting, which would be after the external audit committee meets? Or what are you thinking in that?
I would suggest that it be done prior to July 1st. It gives us some time to complete the budget. and some time to wrestle with exactly how we want to restructure that audit committee and its reporting responsibilities. I have no quarrel with Commissioner Savis's desire to take a look at that if he sees that there's some things that could be done better. But we need to do the budget now, and again, what's on the agenda is the appointment of a member to that audit committee, and we can worry about how we structure it between now and July 1st.
Does somebody want to be appointed?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move we defer the appointment of the audit committee member until the last day of this budget proceeding meetings we have.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Hearing none, the motion dies for lack of a second. We'll move on to appointing a member of the Budget Committee, the citizen member of the Budget Committee, to the Audit Committee. And Mr. Fuley?
Madam Chair, I'd like to nominate Sean Caldwell to be the Budget Committee representative on the Audit Committee.
Thank you, sir. Second. It's been moved and seconded to nominate Sean Caldwell to the External Audit Committee as a citizen member of the Budget Committee. Any other nominations? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, Commissioner Humberston.
Yeah, I would like the record to
And thank you, Sean.
I would like the record to formally reflect that we will have a discussion between now and July 1st on the structure and reporting requirements of the audit committee.
May I ask, sir, are you saying in that the Board of County Commissioners will have that discussion or that the Budget Committee will have that discussion?
Probably advisable that the budget committee as a whole have that discussion.
All right, just for clarity, I wanted to make sure. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
Can I
you.
just ask one question in preparation for that?
Yes, sir.
How many of our budget committee members have actually read the audit? Okay.
Not
thank you.
sure. We have, and we
Maybe we could get a copy of the audit to each of the budget committee members. That way we can have
Would be
a
beneficial.
knowledgeable discussion.
Thank you, sir. Good. With that, I would like to invite, oh,
I
excuse
just
me,
have a
Mr.
quick-
Feely.
Quick question for
Yes.
Krista. If this action doesn't take place till around July 1st, is that allow you enough time to modify the RP if you need to, or is that pose an administrative problem?
We have an existing contract with Moss Adams already, so
you don't have to
we're
go out.
already obligated to work with them for this upcoming year, and unless the county or Board of County Commissioners were to find reason to terminate.
Okay. With that, I would like to invite our County Administrator, Gary Schmidt, to deliver the budget message. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Parks, esteemed members of the Budget Committee. My name is Gary Schmidt. I'm your county administrator. This is my first time presenting a budget message to you. It's also my first time being a county administrator. It's my first time being a budget officer. And thank you for this tremendous opportunity.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. I want to be really respectful of time today and also follow the model that commissioners you've set for your staff is to speak half the time, so there's half the time for questions. So with that, I'm actually not going to go in a lot of oral detail because you have received my budget message. It is in your packets. It's online for members of the public who wish to read it as well. But let me hit the highlights. First of all, I'm pleased to present to you a balanced budget because I'm required by law to do that. That's my report. I'm kidding. No. I have a sense of humor, too. I
That
hope
would
you
have
can
been
appreciate
great.
it. That would-
Right there.
Right there.
The total proposed general government budget is $857 million, which actually is $32 million less than it was last year. So we're actually being responsible with our public dollars. The total budget, though, is $1.2 billion, including all of our special districts, which you can read in your packet. May I have some water, please? This is exciting. All right, so we have a belt-tightening opportunity, commissioners. We are not in crisis. We are not laying off staff, we're not ending programs, but we have a belt-tightening opportunity. Forecasts are moments in time. And when we did our forecast previously, they were accurate as of that point in time. But as we redo our forecast and we reallocate and revision where we're at with our budget and our finances, they change. So we had I would call it a pretty significant budget gap to fill this year, which we have done. But again, it was simply an adjustment based on the realities of when we reprojected our budget, where we are at today. So the process quickly, we started back in January of this year. Each department proposed a budget to me and the finance team, which we then met with those departments in March and April of this year. At that time, we had seen the forecast had changed, so we asked every department to consider between 2 to 5% cuts of general fund allocations to their departments. I did not mandate that to every department. However, I asked every department to consider that. In some cases, I asked departments after they had done that to make more trims to their budgets. In other cases, I allowed them to stay stable with the funds they had, and in some cases, I actually awarded them more money, which I'll talk about in a moment at the end of my message. But I'm very grateful to the staff here who worked very, very carefully and considerately and with great professionalism to make the trims where they felt they could without devastating their departments or their staff. Really, I hope you agree, people are our most valuable resource here at the county, our employees. Without our employees, we can't deliver effective service to the public. Now, can we tighten our belts? Of course, and we've done that. But it was very important to me that we not reduce our staff or drastically cut programs this upcoming fiscal year. So really what I'm presenting to you is a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid budget. It is not a sustainable budget, but we can get through it for one more fiscal year. And then going forward, the staff will work together, myself, the budget staff, every department, on how we can right-size the budget. In essence, our expenses are outpacing our revenues. That really is the situation that we're in. And it's no one's fault. We do great programs here at the county. And in prior years, when Don Krupp was administrator, he created what was called policy-level proposals, where the Budget Committee had an opportunity to fund new programs and services. And over time, that adds up. And there's collateral cost to that, which may not have been anticipated at the time. Certainly staffing costs have gone up over time with cost of living increases and the general business of paying our employees what they are owed if they're a represented employee. The union contracts were renegotiated this past year. So all to say is it adds up, and our expenses are finally catching up, if not exceeding our revenues. That's why we have to right-size our budget going forward. And I want to quickly talk about that. So the staff and I are working together on what it looks like for next fiscal year. And really, we're starting that on July 1st. So July 1st, 2019, we're going to prepare for the July 1st, 2020 budget. And we're going to look at various models of how to do that. There's a term called zero-based budgeting, which many of you may be familiar with. It's where you literally start with zero. If you were creating this program, this service, this department from scratch, what would you need to do that? Not how we do it today or how we've done it in the past. If you were to recreate this, how would you do it? It's an exercise to look at how we fund programs and services. As well as we have really talented finance staff in various departments. We're going to bring their expertise in to help look at this. We're going to ask the public what they think. We'll have a robust public engagement effort starting in July and August, really early. I don't know what that looks like yet, but we'll definitely engage the public. Quickly, this meeting is being, I forgot to say that, this meeting is being live streamed for the first time ever. This is airing live as it happens on our cable channel and on the website. So members of the public can literally watch all day long and all week long
Boy.
to see the work that you do. So also remember that as you're sitting at the table here. But that's another way that we engage our public. So all to say is we're looking at ways of right-sizing the budget going forward. I am proposing, which is in the message, a temporary hiring freeze as of July 1st, 2019. Because it's important that we look at how we're going to right-size the budget before we end up hiring more and more staff, where potentially, I hope not, but there may be a possibility that we have to reduce staff in 2020. That is not my goal or intent, but why hire people if that's going to end up what we may have to do next 2020 fiscal year. So it's a temporary hiring freeze beginning July 1st, which will be exception to that process, of course. We're not going to stop the business of county government. Departments that feel that's an absolutely essential position to fill, then we'll consider that. Every department budget will be tied to managing for results, which is the county's strategic business plan. Almost every department has one now. We're just finalizing a few more departments, and then every county department will have a strategic business plan. As you'll see in your budget documents, most departments that already are engaged in the Managing for Results program have submitted their strategic goals and where they're at on their goals. We are close, but we are not yet 100% strategic plan tied to the budget. That is my expectation for July 1st, 2020 budget, that every strategic business plan will be tied directly to their department budget. And if departments are seeing that they're not achieving the results in their programs, they'll have to ask, is this program still offer a valuable service? And they may have to decide it doesn't anymore. But that's how you tie your strategic plan to your resources. They're really interchangeable. So I think every department has worked on that. They're doing better. We've only done this 4 years. This sounds only, but it takes time to reinstitute this way of doing business at the county. But by the July 2020 fiscal year, it's my expectation every department budget will be 100% tied to their strategic business plan. So that is the direction we're heading for next year. That will help with our budget plan as well. There were no policy level proposals this year. There were what we call maintenance level costs, and much of this information is in all the information you received. But in the past, every department got a slight percentage increase to cover their salaries and cost of living increases for employees, and a slight increase for their materials and supplies line based on the cost of doing business increases. And year after year, that was added on. So there will be no more maintenance level budgets starting July 1st, 2020. That's something else I'm committing to. We're looking at the entire budget process. I'm not just going to give money upon money until they can prove, departments can prove how their strategic plans are tied to their business budget plan. Do you have a quick question, Commissioner?
Twice you said July 2020. My understanding is you're going to start July 2019.
To prepare for the July 1st, 2020 fiscal year budget, yes. So I'm sorry, I'm mixing terms. I'm talking about the budget that starts July 1st, 2020. We're going to start planning for that July 1st, 2019. So we have a whole year to do that, not just wait till February, March in 2020 to prepare for that July. Thank you. We have fully funded the contingency and reserves. That has not been touched, so that's also how I define the health of the organization. I did not have to touch the contingency or reserves at all. That is fully funded, as is required by law, as the Board of Commissioners has directed, so there's no touch to that as well. But with the gap that I filled, I used 2 pots of money to fill the budget gap, and they are the contribution to the County Capital Fund for this one fiscal year only. We are not making that contribution. It's approximately $2.5 million. Is that correct, Krista? So we're not making that every year. The general fund contributes to the County Capital Construction Fund. So for 1 year only, we're not making that contribution. We are still fully funded in the capital fund. We are fine with projects that are coming up the next, I would say, 2 or 3, 4 years. So it's not going to be a detrimental, drastic impact. But I cannot do that again. So for 1 year only, I'm making that, I'm not putting that money in the capital fund to use to fill the gap. The second pot of money I'm using, you're going to laugh, is the unrestricted marijuana dollars. I'm using that pot of money for the some heard it in the audience, thank you. This is totally allowable by law. It's unrestricted, so the county can use it for any purpose it feels. I'm hesitant to use this, though, because once I use it, it's approximately $3.3 million. Once we use it, it's gone. That's not going to be replenished. Now, we're still getting marijuana revenues for the tax the county charges and the state tax, but that is going to a policy-level proposal that the Budget Committee approved last year to fund 3 departments for their efforts related to marijuana regulation and control. It's Transportation and Development, the Sheriff's Office, Health, Housing, and Human Services. So they will still get their money. That was a 5-year policy-level proposal. But the unrestricted pot we had remaining, I'm using to fill this gap. So those are the 2 areas I'm using. It's approximately, if you're adding up here, $5.6 million. That's the gap we had to fill at the end of the day. And those are the 2 areas I'm using to fill that gap. I don't like doing this. I wish I didn't have to do this, but it goes back to the original thing I said. It was very important to me that we not reduce programs and that we don't reduce staff. That was really all I asked the budget staff to do, and then they helped me figure out the way to do that. I'm asking you respectfully to follow that. Of course, I'm presenting the budget to you. It's your decision. But I'm asking for an entire year to work with every department leader, and our administration staff, our budget staff, and you, the Budget Committee, to determine how we're going to right-size this for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020. So that is why I'm proposing to you not a perfect budget, but a balanced budget that is not sustainable, but it will get us through one more year to continue serving the public as we determine together a way to move forward to create a sustainable budget. So with that, I want to jump ahead to, in your budget message, if you are choosing to follow along, it's page 13. There are 5 departments that I am giving extra general fund dollars to help them meet essential services that they provide. Again, these are not policy level proposals, but it's what I'm reallocating money to these 5 departments. And I'll quickly say what they are, although it is in your budget message. First, to the assessor's office, a senior appraiser position. This will be ongoing funding. The assessor reports that using the new aerial technology, they need a staff person to help facilitate that work, but our assessor believes she knows there are many properties that are not assessed at the proper value. This position, using the technology, can actually bring in more general fund revenue. She has to demonstrate to me the return on investment, that this position is indeed doing that. I know she will, based on her expectations as well. So this is a add-on value to the county by what this position can do using the aerial technology, which is why I'm allowing her to add this additional FTE for this purpose. Second, the clerk's office has a quite significant shortfall in recording fees. They have been down dramatically over a period of years, but especially this past year. So to keep her budget whole, I am awarding a one-time general fund contribution of $169,000. I'm not offering that again, so the clerk will have to find, if recording fees remain low, she'll have to find a way to balance her budget without this addition in future years. But I could not allow her to devastate her programs and services without offering her this one-year general fund contribution. Next, the district attorney's office, 2 FTE positions for the purposes of meeting a state law that was passed last session that requires all grand jury proceedings to be recorded, transcribed, and the records stored. The district attorney had no funding. This was an unfunded mandate from the state, so no district attorney's offices were provided the staff to implement this state law. It is a requirement, though, that all district attorneys must do this recording of grand jury proceedings. So the district attorney was going to either lay off attorneys that were doing very important work or ask for 2 positions to meet this unfunded state mandate. So I have awarded him the funding to do that. It is significant, as you'll see, $698,000. And it's also not just for the employees, for the program and materials for conducting that service. I mean, audio recordings, the transcriptions, and then storing it. I do want to credit the district attorney. He also made $465,000 in trims to his budget. He took very seriously my request when I asked every department to please consider trimming your budget more. While I didn't require it, he voluntarily gave back $465,000. So I give great credit to the district attorney. So the net, if you're adding up, is really only $233,000, but I wanted to be transparent. The additional ask was for $698,000. Next, for Health, Housing, and Human Services, commissioners, you know this, and I believe the Budget Committee, the Public Health Fund, the Public Health Division had a $500,000 gap. And so I'm awarding only $150,000 in general funds for one time only. The rest of the gap is being filled by, there were some facilities allocated costs that, thanks to our finance department, they reduced their allocated costs after we did the proposed budget. So Health, Housing, and Human Services received approximately $100,000 back from those facilities allocated cost reductions, as well as, commissioners, you approved a full cost recovery for the environmental health program about a month ago, which is within the Public Health Division. That is helping accommodate, I believe it's around $140,000 that is helping the Public Health Fund. So if you're adding up, that almost covers the $500,000 gap, and the director of that department feels he can cover the rest of that gap within his department. So this keeps them whole, but he needed the $150,000 from the general fund to close that $500,000 gap. Finally, the sheriff's office. So this is a big one, $5.5 million in one-time only general fund dollars, primarily to help the sheriff with the full staffing he has achieved. So Budget Committee, you'll remember, you directed him the last 2 years to fill his vacancies, which he finally did this fiscal year, as well as to meet the jail bed positions that the Budget Committee approved over a 2-year process. This was year 2, to fill those positions, as well as the general cost of living increases for employees. So the 5.5 is not just for the new employees that were added to be fully staffed. It is also for all the employees in the department, which you're seeing as you read my budget message, as you're seeing in departments. The cost of living for every employee has gone up. The new CPI measurement we're using is different. It's a little bit higher. The cost of living is higher to live in Oregon. But it's accounting for all employees for that. But this is significant. And the sheriff every year works with us, and I give him credit. He does his best with the limited resources he has. But this is a big one, $5.5 million to keep his department whole. Again, it's a one-time only, so I'm not offering this again. So especially the sheriff's office, but all departments, we're going to have to work together to find out how we create a sustainable budget moving forward. So I've actually talked more than I said I would. That is my budget message. So again, it's a balanced budget, which I was required to present. These are tough choices we all had to make, but ultimately the decision is mine. I'm the budget officer, and it falls on me. So if you are happy with what I've done, you can thank the staff who helped put it together. If you're not satisfied, you can blame me and hold me accountable. And I mean that. I'm ultimately accountable. But I'm doing what I feel is best for the county, our employees, and the public, I hope. But it's a Band-Aid budget, and that's the budget that I am presenting to you. Quickly, I want to thank the finance team who helped me put this together. Krista Wolf, the finance director, Haley Fish, the deputy director of finance, Jennifer Chambers, our new budget manager. This is her first time, too, as budget manager. Laurel Buttman, deputy county administrator, all the department directors, and of course, you members of the budget committee and our board of county commissioners. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. We'll start with Commissioner Savas and then Commissioner Bernard.
Well, thank you, Gary. I know you inherited a significant challenge here as relates to the budget. And so I want to make sure, as I broach this topic, that I'm not critical of anyone, nor am I'm just trying to figure this out. So my questions related to your, most especially your last one, your one-time funding for $5.5 million for the sheriff's office. And I say that, I just want to just prepare. I've asked staff for some additional material. You've done quite a bit, so thank you. But being that tab 18 has just 6 pieces of paper, it just begs a situation that going forward, there might be a lot more questions because I just trying to understand. So I do have a question. In the material, I'm not sure who can answer it. I think someone in this room can. As I read there in the material that provided in our questions, there's 459 positions that are currently filled in the sheriff's office, and there's 49 temporary positions. These are indeed separate positions, the 49 plus the 459? Anyone? Okay.
So now temporary positions are not included in FTE count, isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Yep.
And some of those are full-time positions though, correct?
That I,
Temporary employees can be full-time employees. The point is they're temporary. They're meant to be over a limited period of time, not ongoing forever, although they can be extended depending on the need, the department need. For appointed department directors, they have to have approval from me to have a long-term temporary employee. Elected officials don't have to follow that model. So in this case, the sheriff by state law doesn't have to have approval of the county administrator for temporary employees.
So I guess my where I'm driving on this one is that some of those temporary employees, if you look at the start dates, even though their names aren't listed, but the positions are, they date back into the 70s and the 80s. So that's really not temporary. I don't know which of those are actually full-time and which of those are not, but it does total $3 million. If the goal was to get the sheriff's office to full staffing, And in light of that, the temporary positions were then indeed to fill those gaps. It seems to me that we've got another 49 positions because we're nearing the sheriff's requested position or number of 460, I believe, 462 positions. Is that about right?
Sheriff has 468 FTEs
468.
total.
So right now, we have 500 plus positions. And so it seems to me that, I don't know, unless someone can answer the question, was the purpose of funding the temporary positions indeed temporary? And if so, which ones? And will that diminish now that we're at full staffing? I'm confused, and I'm only raising this because of the significance, as you stated, Administrator Schmidt, the budget is not sustainable. And so this is vividly clear, as is on page 8, tab 18, page 8. We've got a huge gap, 7,300,000.
So I would suggest that's a great question to ask the sheriff when he does his budget presentation later this week. I do know that, especially for deputies, when new deputies are hired, there's about an 18-month process that they have to be trained before they can be fully ready to go, in which case temporary employees are usually the retiring employee will stay on for a period of time until that new deputy is fully trained and ready to go. So part of it is that, but you ask questions that I think the sheriff can best answer when he presents.
Okay. So is it wise now, for efficiency's sake, to pose those questions to staff now so they're prepared, so they come back when the sheriff comes here?
Absolutely. We can give the sheriff a heads up.
So
yes.
I would request that. I also request that of the hires in the sheriff's department in the last 3 years, how many of those are sworn and how many of those are non-sworn? Of the actual hires.
Yes.
Right, thank you very much. Commissioner Bernard and then Commissioner Humberston.
I actually have
And
the
then Commissioner Fisher.
very same concerns, looking at that budget and the temporary nature of those employees. So I'd like that answer too. But I'm going to ask a couple other questions, which I think for the same reason you asked that question. One thing later on, we're going to have Justice Court folks in here today, and we have a substantial unpaid fines and fees. I spoke to the DA about that the other day when I met with him, and in the past, there was an employee hired to collect those dollars. That employee got a little over anxious and did things that might be a little shady, and so they fired him. But I'd like to talk about doing that, looking at some sort of collection. A collection agency charged about 50%. By the way, it's $7 million in unpaid fines and fees. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is.
But there's also the concern about a lot of those kind of issues may be people who couldn't afford the fines and fees. We definitely don't want that to happen. Put a greater burden on people and end up losing their car, house, and everything else, and then we end up providing that service. I'd also like to look again at, Stephen Madcore gave us the most comprehensive answer to my question is, what's the county required to do? I've never seen that entire
was-
list before. And so it was very helpful. And part of it, again, has to do with those temporary employees. Is there an ORS that we could, or a policy that we could create that would require, and this is probably of Madcore, to any temporary employees that are funded through the general fund, we would have, or you would, have a say on that. I'd definitely like to look at that, and it may require some legislation if necessary. So that would be great. And then zero-based budgeting. I don't know, have you guys all done zero-based budgeting?
I did with the chamber, yeah.
Yeah, I took a training when I was a mayor, so it's been a long time. So I think we're gonna need a little training on zero-based budgeting. And of course, zero-based budgeting will start with zero, and then we'll add in contractual agreements and stuff like that to get to a point that in some cases probably will not be fundable. And so that's the kind of thing we need to get into. I also want to thank the folks who did all this work on this packet, answering those questions. It's a lot of work. And I can imagine a few late nights and weekends, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And I agree with you. It was great information that was sent out to the Budget Committee in response to questions that had been posed to them. And I also found it very interesting to see what's mandated and what isn't, and what elected officials can do differently than department heads that are appointed. So we have to keep those kinds of things in mind as we go through this. So we have Commissioner Humberston, and then Commissioners Fisher and Schrader, and then Mr. Feely.
Well, it's interesting, I think at least three of us came up with the same question regarding the sheriff's department's budget, but I think a simple question on that is, he has a gross number that he has allocated, whatever that may be, and how he spends that on what employees, to a large degree under the ORS, is pretty much at his discretion. So as long as those extra 49 employees come in under that budget, based on what I read in the ORS material, I'm not sure what we can in fact do. We can certainly ask a lot of questions about it. And I suppose you could do a meat cleaver approach and reduce a budget by a certain amount, and then, but I'm not sure that that's a very effective way to go, quite frankly. But it's a question worth asking. I had one other issue, but I'll let it go for now.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Fisher, then Schrader, Feely, and Salas. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for the budget message. I'm wondering about the marijuana revenues. You stated that we're using 3.3 to backfill the shortfall. How much are we getting this year, anticipated in marijuana revenue?
I'll ask for help from Krista or Haley, please.
Oh, I turned it off rather than on. We get approximately 500,000 in the local restricted and approximately 1 million in unrestricted state funds a year, and then that slowly is projected to go up.
Okay, so then how do we come up with 3.3 million?
You're not supposed to touch that button, leave the light on.
I should just leave it on. We actually received lots in the first 2 years. So the PLP started this fiscal year, but we had funds that were received before this fiscal year. So the funds I talked about, approximately 1.5 is what we're getting annually, including this year. But we had received funds prior to that. The state turned over funds for the first year and a half in lump sums, and then in the first year we had normal revenues. We didn't have the PLP in place.
Okay, so my question, I just want to make sure, I'm not able to do the math this quickly, but that we have the resources within this budget cycle, through those resources, to do the policy level proposal that we approved last year.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, separate. All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Schrader.
Yes, thank you, colleagues. One of the things I've asked staff to take a look at is the large number of nonprofits that we consistently give dollars to over and above what a grant process has been for our county. And what I've asked is, I know Laurel is working on that, a list of those nonprofits and a history of the amount of dollars that we have given. Because this year, for example, we've been approached by a number of nonprofits, which is usual. And knowing that we are operating under a constrained budget, I caution them that there's no guarantee that dollars would be forthcoming. And I've really tried to do a deep dive to find out who are the largest nonprofits that we have traditionally given to, why we've traditionally given to them, if we really need to move to more of a grant model, so folks don't come to us and actually try to peel us off. I had one nonprofit who I've worked with for a number of years say, actually, you made an agreement with us to continually give us this money. There was no contract to continually give any money that I could find. So it's those kinds of things that, as much as we support these folks, I think we need to do a deep dive into the amount of dollars. And also, we don't oftentimes have any direct data about what the outcomes are. They're nice programs. We're assuming that people are meeting metrics, but it's been very difficult to tease that out. So for me, that's just another piece to look at. And I do know, for example, that evidently Parrot Creek has been one of our nonprofits. And I thought when we went to our juvenile budget, I would ask, they were not given a contract. Am I correct this year with that? Yeah.
They're not included in
Yeah.
there.
So that's something I'd like to kind of know about, because again, there's kind of been an expectation that they, we're the go-to. So I think we need to examine that.
So if I may quickly,
Yes.
Commissioner, yes, the juvenile department had a request for proposals for services,
Right.
of which Parrot Creek had been providing those services. They applied for the RFP, but they were not selected. It was a very formal process that had juvenile staff and other staff that reviewed the request for proposals. And unfortunately, Parrot Creek wasn't awarded, so they had to go through that process. It wasn't just an automatic budget request each
Right.
year.
Right. Do all of our nonprofits go through that process?
No.
No.
Okay, thank you for that. That's
Yes, thank you.
one of my points is the consistency of how we work with the nonprofits we contract or we work with in order to provide services.
Forgive me, I apologize. If it's a formal contract, yes. There's
Okay.
always a request for proposal process.
Right.
There are some funds the county gives to nonprofits, which is not through a contract process.
Correct,
That's what I
yeah,
meant,
that, the small grants program, and that was one of the questions I had as it comes up later, is there a policy for that? Is there some kind of reckoning on how that money was spent? I know that, for instance, using tourism as an example, back when I was helping to facilitate tourism projects in the county through the Chamber of Commerce, we wrote basically a grant, and this is what we're going to do with the money, and then we had to go back to tourism, rightly so, and explain how we used it, what the outcomes were, and what the value was to the county for what we did. And it would seem that we'd want to do the same type of thing with our nonprofits. So it'd be good for us, I think, to look at what those guidelines, policies, whatever are for that. So, very good.
I made
Thank
this
you.
for the small grants program, absolutely. We have a very
Yes,
detailed
yeah.
system. An annual report has to be filed, how the funds were spent. So yes, there's a reporting back to the county on how they use those funds.
Yeah, thank you.
But largely, some of these monies have been over and above the small grants program. So-
Yeah, and even though on the list, they were all listed as small grants program, which was, if I remember correctly,
$300,000.
$300,000. I wanted to make sure that I read that correctly, where I believe that what we'd put in small grants was $100,000, but there's 300,000 listed under small grants. So,
No,
some,
the amount was increased.
yeah.
Amount was increased,
Yeah.
if not by the Budget
three
Committee, the
hun-
Board of Commissioners did
Oh,
increase
okay.
it to $300,000 this current fiscal year. So
Okay,
that's
good. That's good to know for us, because the last I recalled was the 100,000 that we had increased it to from 50,000. Which shows there's a lot of need in the county for, functions that deal with the services that people need on an ongoing basis, so.
So what Martha was saying perhaps is some of those that we'd like give
We
300,000.
should put into it.
Do
Yeah.
we get a report back from them?
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Yes, we do.
Right,
We
and
do.
that's something we should check into. So I want to try to keep us on time as much as possible, because we do also, I know you have 3 of you up right now with questions, but we also are slated for this time to begin the discussion about, the discussion about county priorities. So, Mr. Feely?
Anyway, Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a request in the temporary positions. I'd like to know what the HR definition of temporary position. We're kind of at the intersection of HR and budget, and it always gets a little
Yeah.
confusing. I'd also like to know those positions by job class and how many hours they were in active pay status for whatever period of time is easiest to get. I know at my prior employer, we could have a temporary employee. They may not have gotten paid anything that year until we bring them back for a project. So I don't know kind of how it works here at the county. So that would help
Okay.
at least make an informed decision. My other comments on zero-based budgeting, and I've already spouted off about it. I've been through it many, many times. With a true zero base, zero, we did a modified zero base, I think 30, 40, 50, 60%. It doesn't solve your problem for you. I mean, it can work. It's somewhat inconsistent with performance management, managing for results. I would just really implore you to look at where it's worked, where it hasn't worked, and what modifications people have made to that sort of classical Pentagon, 1970s classic zero-based budgeting process. I promise I won't
Good.
say anything else about it for 2 weeks.
That's great. I think we all have concerns about that particular area of the budget. So Commissioner Savas, then Humberston, and then Citizen Member Lee.
Yeah, a couple things. I do want to just touch on Commissioner Humberson's question about the budget, and there's not much we can do. Actually, if you look at the policies, I think I heard some questions, and the requested materials that were sent out by Jennifer Chambers on Friday, if you actually read that, particularly the December 14th, 2011 policy outline, and if you look at the bottom of page 2, the last paragraph, it kind of defines what those are, those temporary positions and so forth. But specifically, that the more detail and budget lines,
Yeah.
trying to
I
help.
was just wondering about copies of that. I read it all online, but I don't have a copy of that in front of me to
Yeah.
refer to.
Yeah, but it probably be interesting, some of the questions I already heard, but I want to point out that, and I'll use the sheriff's office one as the example, the best example, because it's the largest one of all. But if you look at the number of budget lines, if you really want to control that, basically, when you read all the language, it'll basically say what's budgeted by us is what's allowed to be spent. So if you put a line and send that temporary employees budget line was half of what it is on this list, that's all that are allowed to spend. And if you have more detail to that, let's just say that you had one for sworn positions, or you could break that down into sworn positions for jail or sworn positions for patrol or sworn positions for other. You can break it down, but the more that the budget is condensed, the less control and transparency that there is. To Commissioner Schrader's question about the nonprofits, I think that is worthy, but I also think that we need to look at that kind of surgically, because it may be that some of the nonprofits are able to provide services more affordably and more efficiently than we can. I don't know. I don't know the answer,
That's
but
part of what the conversation should be.
yeah, but incorporating that into our MFR might be a good idea, at least to some degree, not in great detail, but in somewhat of trying to extrapolate out how efficient those are to your point. So I think that's good, Martha. I did want to say that in preparation, one other thing I'd request, and I just draw your attention to tab 18. The page isn't numbered, I'm sorry. It may have been numbered, but it maybe got punched, but I guess it would be the third page. Budget line 4310000. I'm only asking, I'm not going into the budget, but I just want to get material prepared for. That's professional services, and it's got a budget of $6,624,000. I'd like a breakdown of what that is. That's a lot of money. And also like to get a breakdown of the, and you kind of already done that perhaps, but of the overtime, maybe in a departmental level, where is that? Because I really thought that those would be diminished as we added more staff, that we would see less need for overtime, and we've added considerably, so we're making that investment, but it's gone down a little bit, but it's still up really high, but maybe a breakdown of that. And lastly, to I think Jennifer I sent an email to, but a reply on budget to actuals for the last 5 years. Did you get that email from me on Friday?
I don't recall.
I think I replied to you about the budget to actuals for the last 5 years to help answer Mr. Feely's questions, I think, in a way, and Sean Colwell's questions as well, mine, to get better clarity of how we got here, how we got in this mess. But that's what I'd like to have in preparation for that discussion. Any questions or clarity?
Are you asking for just the sheriff's fund or for all funds?
In this one here, well, under line 4310000, professional services, that a breakdown of that 6.6 million,
Yes.
or the prior year of 6.2.
I believe those are contracted services with ELED, but I could be wrong. But we can get that and have the sheriff's department help. Nancy's saying I'm wrong, so she'll correct us. But I was asking more about the budget to actuals. Are you asking for those for just the sheriff's fund, for just those lines, or for every fund?
Well, actually not, actually for the entire, for the whole general fund budget. Not by department, but budget to actuals, what we actually budgeted for in general fund. Like we see our forecast, very generic like that.
So just the general fund.
Just the general fund, yes. When you do the forecast, you know how that, if you just look at that deal and just do the budget and the actuals and do it for 5 years.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Humberston and then Ms. Lee.
I will be brief. I'll just point out that under the grants programs of one kind or another, it's about $3,142,000, which is 50% of our budget shortfall going into 2020. Not that I'm suggesting that we cut all of that, but,
Right.
you know, that is discretionary money, and we need to be aware of that as we go through that part of the budget. With respect to the sheriff's office, I would simply point out that the sheriff is an official who appoints the employees in his office, and the sheriff has statutory authority to organize the sheriff's office and direct the work of those employees. The county administrator shall exercise no authority over the actions of elected county officials while they are performing the duties of their offices. And under county code section, he can select, appoint, supervise, or discipline, and dismiss all county administrative staff and all employees except county council and any elected officers. So again, I caution people to be aware that the sheriff's charter, if you will, for lack of a better word, is pretty clear in terms of the authority that he has in terms of establishing the positions in his department and how they are used and how those funds are spent. Do I entirely agree with all of that? That's a different question, but we need to be aware that that's what the statutory authorities are and not get out ahead of our own skis.
Good point.
Thank you.
Ms. Lee?
Yes, this is my first year on the Budget Committee, but I had a couple questions about potential revenue that we may not have identified yet. And one of them is the vehicle registration fee, and I was wondering when that comes into the budget process.
That's a good question. Yeah. Administrator Schmidt, can you answer that?
The other one I would ask about is I know there is a legal suit of the counties by the state of Oregon regarding forestry lands, and I wondered if there's been any outcome on that.
I can answer the second one, and then Dan Johnson's going to text me on the first question. So actually, Stephen's here too. That's not been resolved yet, that legal case on the forest lands, correct, Stephen?
Correct.
That's not been resolved yet. The county, as far as funding, the Secure Rural Schools Act, that's timber money that comes to counties each year. Thanks once again to Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley. They have given yet another extension for that to the counties. It was held back by sequestration, but now it's been released again. All to say is we will continue to receive that money. It's not very much. I think it's about $1.1 million, but that certainly helps. And then regarding the vehicle registration fee, I know it doesn't take effect until I believe in 2020. So it would not be this current fiscal year. It's not part of the current fiscal year budget, but it would be for the 2020 fiscal year budget.
Thank
There it
you.
is. Thank you, Dan.
Okay, great,
It's
thank you.
effect immediately though, doesn't
That's
it?
what I thought.
No?
Doesn't take effect immediately, right, Dan? And not until, I think it's January 1st, 2020 it takes effect? Approximately, yeah.
Listen to the-
Because the state has to go, the state has time, needs time to do its,
An IGA and all
how it
that
collects
stuff,
the
too.
data, funds.
Chair, just 1 30-second little input or less. I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Humberston's, on that, again, going back to that 2011 document, first page, second paragraph. No one's challenging the authority, but I just want to let everyone know that the that the responsibility for funding is the Budget Committee, that's us. And I want to read specifically the last line, comma, if the sheriff has budget authority from the Board of County Commissioners to hire the employee. So that the key is that detail and breakout in the budget is the control is the only control we have on a fiscal standpoint. That is it.
Thank you.